The first time I saw her, it felt like the earth shifted under my feet. 35 years ago, I walked into a diner on Main Street, and there she was. Sitting at the counter, sipping a milkshake, and laughing with her friends. She had a smile that could light up the darkest night and eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. I didn't just fall for her, I crashed headfirst. We were both young, me just starting my career in construction and her fresh out of high school. But I knew she was it for me. She had this warmth, this glow about her, like she was meant to be the center of someone's world. I made sure that someone was me. 6 months later, we were married. Some people said it was too soon, but I never doubted it. Not for a second. She was my rock, my calm in the storm. I worked long hours, and she stayed home, raising our kids. We had 2 bright, beautiful children who were her spitting image. She was the one who bandaged scraped knees, who baked cookies after school, who made birthdays magical. I took care of the bills and the roof over our heads. It was a deal we both agreed on. She wanted to be home with the kids, and I wanted her there too. It worked, for a while. The years passed. The kids grew up and moved out, and suddenly, it was just the 2 of us in that big, quiet house. I thought we were fine. Sure, the spark wasn't as bright as it once was, but that's just life, right? You settle into a routine, into comfort. I thought she was happy because she always seemed content. But I should have seen it. The way her laughter had started to dim. How her eyes, once so full of life, seemed distant. I didn't realize how lonely she was. How the life I thought was perfect for us felt like a cage to her. And then came the day when everything started to change. She began going out more, walks in the park, coffee shops, even taking up yoga classes. I was glad, at first. Happy she was finding ways to occupy her time. I didn't question it because I trusted her. Trusted us. I didn't ask who she was meeting or what she was doing because I was too busy with work, too comfortable in my assumptions. It wasn't until I noticed the subtle shifts that unease began to creep in. Her smile was brighter, but it wasn't for me. Her phone was always close, her laughter softer but frequent, echoing in the next room while I sat alone in the den. Something, or someone, was filling the space I had left empty. She didn't hide it well. Or maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she wanted me to notice, to say something, to fight for her. But I was too damn blind, or too damn arrogant, to think she'd ever stray. Then, one evening, she mentioned a friend, a young man she met at her yoga class. He was 20 years younger, she said, but so kind, so understanding. He gets me, she told me, and for the first time in decades, I saw a light in her eyes that I hadn't put there. That was the beginning of the end. It started innocently enough, or at least that's what she told me later. His name was Daniel. 20 years younger, a guy trying to find himself after bouncing between odd jobs. He taught yoga part-time, did freelance graphic design, and spent his weekends playing guitar at some local dive bar. She said he reminded her of herself when she was younger, full of dreams and possibilities, unburdened by the weight of the life we had built together. They met during one of her yoga classes. She'd picked it up on a whim after seeing a flyer at the coffee shop. Good for the soul, it said. Maybe she thought her soul needed saving. At first, it was just conversations after class. She'd come home and tell me about this funny guy who could mimic their instructor's accent perfectly or who could hold a pose longer than anyone else. She laughed when she talked about him, and I remember thinking, good. She's happy. I even teased her once, tell Daniel to watch out. I might start getting jealous. She just smiled, but it wasn't her usual smile, it was the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. As weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened. She started texting more, her phone buzzing late at night. It's just Daniel, she'd say casually, brushing off my questions. I shrugged it off, figuring she was just lonely with the kids gone. What harm could it do? The harm came in small, deliberate doses. She began dressing differently, not in the usual comfortable clothes she wore around the house but sleek, flattering outfits I hadn't seen in years. She started wearing makeup, even on days when she wasn't going anywhere. I asked about it once, and she told me it was just for fun. But it wasn't fun when I noticed how long she stared at herself in the mirror before her yoga class, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles and reapplying her lipstick. One Friday night, I came home late from work, and the house was unusually quiet. She wasn't in the kitchen where she usually was, waiting for me with dinner or a snack. Instead, I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with her phone. Her face was lit up, her fingers moving across the screen like she was crafting poetry. She didn't even notice me standing in the doorway. "Who's got you smiling like that?" I asked, half joking but feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. She looked up, startled, and for a moment, there was something in her eyes, guilt? Fear? She laughed it off. "Oh, just a funny meme," she said, holding her phone closer to her chest. It wasn't just a meme. The first time I saw them together, I didn't mean to. I'd finished work early and decided to surprise her by picking her up from yoga. I parked outside the studio, but instead of walking inside, I waited. I wanted to see her face light up when she spotted me, one of those silly, romantic notions you get after decades of marriage. But when she came out, she wasn't alone. There he was. Daniel. Younger, taller, with that cocky, carefree air that comes with not having a mortgage or responsibilities. They stood close, too close, talking in low voices. And then she laughed, loud and carefree, the way she used to laugh with me. He touched her arm lightly, and she didn't pull away. I sat frozen in my truck, watching as she leaned in closer to him, as though the world around them didn't exist. My heart thudded in my chest, and for the first time in 35 years, I felt like an outsider in my own life. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Instead, I drove home, sat in the dark kitchen, and waited for her. She came in an hour later, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling like a teenager who'd just been kissed for the first time. "Yoga went late," she said, dropping her bag by the door. She didn't even look at me as she walked past, humming softly to herself. That night, lying in bed next to her, the distance between us felt insurmountable. I wanted to reach out, to pull her close, to demand answers, but I didn't. Maybe I was afraid of what she'd say. Maybe I wasn't ready to admit that the woman who had been my entire world was slowly slipping away. The texts became more frequent. The excuses more flimsy. "Daniel just gets me," she said one day, almost defensively, when I asked why they spent so much time together. "We're just friends. You don't have to worry." But I did. Because deep down, I already knew. I just wasn't ready to face it. The day I confirmed my worst fears is seared into my memory like a scar I'll never escape. It started like any other Saturday, quiet, unassuming, the kind of day where you think the world is still turning the way it always has. She said she had a yoga class and lunch with the girls. I nodded absently, sipping my coffee, pretending not to notice how her voice trembled slightly as she kissed my cheek and walked out the door. But something didn't sit right. Maybe it was her perfume, more than she usually wore. Or the way she kept checking her phone that morning, as if waiting for a message. I don't know. But after 35 years, you know your spouse's rhythms, and hers were all wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, an hour after she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. It wasn't yoga. I parked across the street from the coffee shop where she was supposed to be meeting her friends, but instead of going inside, she kept walking. My heart sank with every step she took away from that cafe, every block she put between herself and the story she'd spun for me. And then I saw him. Daniel was waiting by a park bench, looking like he belonged on the cover of some bohemian lifestyle magazine, tousled hair, casual clothes that probably cost a fortune to look that effortless. She spotted him and broke into that wide, unguarded smile I hadn't seen in years. He pulled her into an embrace that lingered just a little too long for friends. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, watching as they strolled hand in hand through the park. The way she looked at him, the way he leaned down to whisper something that made her laugh, it was the kind of connection I thought we still had. The kind I thought we would always have. When they stopped by a small fountain, he brushed a strand of hair from her face and kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a deep, lingering kiss that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the betrayal of the act, it was the intimacy. The way she melted into him like she belonged there. I wanted to storm out of the truck, grab her by the arm, and demand to know what the hell was happening. But I didn't. Instead, I drove away, my vision blurred by the tears I refused to let fall. That night, I confronted her. She came home later than usual, humming to herself, a spring in her step. I was sitting in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey, when she walked in. "How was yoga?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She froze, her smile faltering. "Good." "Why?" "Because I know you weren't at yoga." I stood up, the anger bubbling to the surface. "I saw you, with him. At the park." Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked like the girl I fell in love with, scared, vulnerable. But then she straightened her shoulders and met my gaze. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "Not what I think." I barked, my voice rising. "I watched you kiss him. I watched you hold his hand like he was your husband. So don't stand there and lie to me." She flinched at the venom in my words but didn't back down. "It just happened, okay? I didn't plan for this." "Didn't plan for this?" I repeated, incredulous. "We've been married for 35 years, and you didn't plan to destroy it all." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any pity. Not then. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand how the woman I'd given my entire life to could throw it away for some guy who probably didn't even know how to spell commitment. Why? I demanded. What does he have that I don't? Tell me. She hesitated, her lips trembling, and then she said the words that would haunt me forever: "He makes me feel alive." Alive. As if the life we built together, the home, the family, the sacrifices, wasn't enough. As if I wasn't enough. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Alive? And what am I? Dead weight? A placeholder until someone better came along? No, she said quickly, stepping closer, reaching for my hand. But I pulled away. Her touch, once my anchor, now felt like fire on my skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." "Too late," I said flatly. I stared at her, this stranger who wore my wife's face, and I realized there was no coming back from this. Whatever we had was already gone. That night, she slept in the guest room, and I stared at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. "He makes me feel alive." I had spent my life trying to give her everything, everything except what she needed most. And now I was the one left to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage, while she chased a fantasy of a life I could never provide. The days after that confrontation felt like I was wading through a thick fog, a haze of disbelief and rage that clouded everything else in my life. My wife, no, the woman who used to be my wife, moved about the house as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Every glance she cast my way, every word she said, felt hollow, a pale imitation of the connection we once shared. She might as well have been a ghost haunting the home we had built together. I couldn't stand the silence between us, but I also couldn't bear to fill it. I avoided her, burying myself in work during the day and in whiskey at night. The routines that once defined our lives, shared dinners, lazy evenings in front of the TV, disintegrated into awkward avoidance. She'd disappear for hours, sometimes even entire nights, and I didn't ask where she went. I didn't need to. I already knew. My days were spent oscillating between fury and despair. I'd find myself staring at our wedding photo on the mantel, a relic of a life that now felt like a cruel joke. 35 years. How does someone walk away from that? How does someone throw away a lifetime? I couldn't understand it. No matter how many sleepless nights I spent trying to piece it together, it never made sense. The betrayal wasn't just about Daniel. It was about the realization that she had been lonely for years and hadn't told me. She'd sat in that house, day after day, yearning for something I never noticed she needed. And when she finally found it, she didn't turn to me. She turned to him. That thought burned worse than the whiskey I used to drown it out. I started going through our past, trying to pinpoint where it had all gone wrong. The anniversaries we barely celebrated. The conversations that had dwindled into polite exchanges about groceries and bills. The nights spent on opposite sides of the bed, the distance between us growing wider with every passing year. Had I been blind? Or had I just convinced myself that this was what love looked like after decades? One day, I came home to find her packing a suitcase. She didn't say anything, and neither did I. She worked methodically, folding her clothes with the kind of care she used to put into making our kids' lunches or decorating the Christmas tree. It hit me then, this was real. She wasn't just slipping away. She was leaving. I went to the garage, needing to put distance between us before I said or did something I couldn't take back. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the walls, at the shelves of tools and paint cans I hadn't touched in years. This had been my domain, the place where I fixed things, built things, made our house a home. But there was no fixing this. No hammer or nail could patch the cracks in a marriage that had already crumbled to dust. When I finally went back inside, her suitcase was gone, and so was she. A note sat on the kitchen counter, her familiar handwriting twisting the knife that was already lodged in my chest. She said she needed time to figure out who she was, what she wanted. She said she still cared about me, but she couldn't stay. I tore the note in half and threw it in the trash. The weeks that followed were hell. She didn't come back. I'd see her car parked outside Daniel's apartment building when I drove by. Yes, I stooped that low, tailing her like some pathetic lovesick fool. Seeing her there, stepping into his world, was like watching someone else live the life that should have been mine. The divorce papers arrived not long after. She'd filed. I stared at the envelope for days before I could bring myself to open it. When I did, the reality of it all hit me like a sledgehammer. 35 years, reduced to a stack of legal documents. The house felt emptier than ever, even though it was filled with all the same furniture, all the same photos. Her absence was a gaping wound, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. Our kids called, worried about me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. How do you explain to your grown children that the life they thought was unshakable had collapsed? I started going through the motions of life, work, eat, sleep, repeat. But everything felt pointless. I couldn't stop replaying the moments that led us here, couldn't stop imagining her with him. What did they talk about? Did he make her laugh the way I used to? Did she ever think about me, about the life we'd built together, or was I just a distant memory now? One night, I came across an old photo album while rummaging through the closet. Flipping through the pages, I saw us in our younger years, grinning at the camera on our wedding day, holding our newborn son, posing with the kids at Disneyland. We looked so happy. And maybe we were. Or maybe I'd just been fooling myself all along. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for her anymore. She'd made her choice, and I had to make mine. I wouldn't let her betrayal define the rest of my life. But letting go was easier said than done. Letting go of her wasn't a singular moment. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany or a triumphant turning point. It was slow and agonizing, like trying to wring water from a stone. Every day, I woke up in the bed we used to share, in the house we built together, and I had to remind myself she was gone, and that she wasn't coming back. The papers were signed. The divorce was final. 35 years of marriage, reduced to a judge's signature and a stack of documents tucked away in a drawer I didn't have the strength to open. She didn't even linger in the house after the court hearing. She was gone before I made it home, her keys and wedding ring left on the kitchen counter, the last trace of her in the life we'd shared. I was free. That's what people told me. You can start fresh, they said. This is your chance to live for yourself. But freedom felt like a hollow victory when I spent every evening eating dinner alone at the same table where we used to laugh with our kids. The house was too quiet, the silence so oppressive I found myself turning on the TV just for the background noise. And yet, as the days turned to weeks and the weeks into months, something inside me began to shift. It started small. I cleaned out the closet, packing up the things she'd left behind, the clothes she didn't care to take, the trinkets that had once filled our shelves. I donated them, refusing to let her shadow linger any longer than it already had. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls a different color. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I began to reconnect with the world outside the bubble of my grief. I accepted invitations from friends I hadn't seen in years, joined a local cycling group, and even signed up for a woodworking class, a hobby I'd neglected for decades. It felt strange at first, like I was living someone else's life, but it was also liberating. The hardest part was confronting the memories. Every corner of that house was steeped in them, the way she used to dance while cooking dinner, the sound of her laughter echoing down the hall. I couldn't escape them, so I stopped trying. I let myself remember. I let myself grieve. But I also let myself imagine a future without her. Our children were my saving grace. They called often, visited when they could, and slowly became my reason to keep going. They didn't pry too much, didn't ask for details, but their quiet support meant more to me than they probably realized. I saw pieces of her in them, the way our daughter tilted her head when she was deep in thought, the way our son's smile crinkled at the corners. And then there was Daniel. I saw him once, months after the divorce was finalized. I was running errands when I spotted them together at the farmer's market. She looked radiant, younger somehow, her hand tucked into his as they strolled past the stalls. He leaned down to say something, and she laughed, that carefree, unrestrained laugh I hadn't heard in years. I stood frozen, watching them from a distance, a part of me wanting to march over and demand answers I already knew I'd never get. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away. That was the moment I realized I had to let her go, not just physically, but emotionally. She wasn't mine anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. The anger faded slowly, replaced by a kind of quiet acceptance. I still felt the ache, the hollow space where she used to be, but it didn't consume me anymore. Life went on, and so did I. In time, I found myself smiling again. Laughing again. The wounds she left didn't heal completely, they never would, but they scarred over, a testament to the pain I'd endured and the strength I'd found. And as I stood on my back porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a strange sense of peace. She was gone, and I couldn't change that. But I could choose what came next. I chose me.